Hello, everyone. Welcome to another heartfelt conversation. Happy today to have with me a very dear friend and an established business and HR leader. Gopal Iyer joins me today on this heartfelt conversation. But before I hand over to him, just a little bit about myself. I'm an HR professional with over 2 decades of experience in the space. I've recently launched this heartfelt conversation to try and help all of us in the community, all of us who are listening in, to grow and to build careers for the long term. I try to bring in voices with different perspectives, different experiences that can all help us in our journey to excel. And therefore, I'm extremely thrilled today to have with me none other than Gopal Iyer. Welcome to the stage, Gopal.
Thank you, Vikas. It's a pleasure to be here and talking about a subject which is really close to my heart, and look forward to this wonderful show and wishing you all the very best.
Thank
Um,
you so much.
and let's,
Really looking
yeah.
forward to this myself as well. And I'm sure there are a lot of people already starting to jump in. While we start, people, why don't you just let us know where you're coming in from? Write the name of your city, town, country in the comments, and it'll be lovely to see which all corners of the world you decided to drop in from. So Gopal, like I shared, is a very established and accomplished individual. He's someone who's worked in the HR world, in the business world, in the consulting world, and he's not only an expert in talent and organizational development, but really an expert in the gig economy. And that's the reason we've decided to set up this conversation around careers in the gig economy. He has about 2 years or 2 decades of experience at top consulting firms like EY and Deloitte, and in these firms as well, he's been very focused and chartered towards building out the future of work programs, and many of them have overlapped with the gig economy. Gopal is also currently the chief operating officer at Noble House, where he uses his deep expertise to oversee a marketplace for freelancers and consultants, right? Apart from, of course, business consulting and full-time hiring solutions. Very interestingly, Gopal and I really launched our own podcast around a very similar time frame, and he runs what he calls the Career Shifts podcast. Again, very relevant in these times. We've really bounced off ideas with each other. We feed in on each other's energy, and a lot of what you're seeing today is thanks to his guidance and his input. So, thank you for that, Gopal. That's the beauty of these platforms, isn't it? Where we get to share with one another and just grow collectively. Interestingly, Gopal has also worked with the in IIM Ahmedabad, and he set up their school of public policy. So he's knows how to create programs, build programs right from the ground up. And today, as he coaches other senior leaders, he teaches at B schools like the Masters Union. He is able to transfer his energy, his knowledge into the larger ecosystem. So I'm really glad that today he's joining us in this session and supporting us in all our growth objectives. So thank you, Gopal, for joining in. Any starting conversation and comments from you?
No, I think you're right. I mean, we are living in extremely interesting times, is what I would say, where on one hand, there is enough and more opportunities, is something as I also shared in my earlier podcast, which I hosted. But the challenge always has been, how do we tap into that, and where do we get to know about such opportunities and what kind of opportunities that exist, and which is where I think gig economy plays a huge role in being able to be engaged, and not just be thinking about being employed. And we'll talk a lot about all of that in just a bit. But yeah, really looking forward to share whatever I have kind of gathered over the last 5 years. And I should really take this opportunity to thank my earlier boss at EY, Shrikant, who in fact championed these efforts at EY, and of course Sumer and Sanjay, who lead Noble House, who kind of are in a mission to be able to get more, freelancers opportunities. So we are just trying to see how best we can help each other and make this world wherever we are able to engage with people.
Awesome, Gopal. I think really nice of you to actually call out and thank those people who've contributed to your journey and who are trying to make a difference in the space. Really commendable. Being an HR professional myself over the years, I have also experienced, the other side of the gig economy. I have tried to and been part of numerous discussions where we've tried to explore these models. and often we reach a roadblock, because these are not very simple matters to solve, right? I mean, if I look back at my own journey, we grew up at, think, almost around the similar time. And whether or not it was the right thing to do, but I think our generation was still somewhere more attuned towards, while we you know took on the public sector in a private sector in a big way, and we got comfortable with it, we still in our minds wanted that stability of a full-time employee and the benefits that are associated with it, and they're hard coded into our brains. Very recently, last 4 5 years, we've started hearing about the gig economy, but again we've heard about it in context of the blue collar workers, when we see the Ubers and the Zomatos of the world all around us, urban clap. But when it comes to white collar workers, there's always been a little bit of a question mark in terms of, how is this model going to work, what's going to happen, and does it really have any long term impact. So the first question I probably want to throw at you is that, what are the common misconceptions about the big gig economy in India, particularly regarding these white collar professionals?
So before I answer that question, because I think it's very important for us to go back in time and look at how we evolved into this, right? I mean, it may be pretty much prominent in the last 5 years, as you may see, but the very old seeds of gig economy was sown at probably in the early 90s, or early 2000s, when it came to the Y2K boom, if I can call that. um, what happened was there was excess of roles that were advertised, people joined, and suddenly the Y2K bomb busted, and people were like out of roles, and suddenly there was this new ways of working that emerged, which probably also was known as body shopping. While that continued, we saw a lot of work shifting to India. Outsourcing became the new norm. Um, there was again 2008 crisis that happened,
Yeah,
um, and it led to again similar situation of where people were either asked to leave or wanted to do something else. And uh, if we really go back in time and look at how gig economy has emerged, it has emerged at every single point of time when there has been a downturn or a recession, either a planned one at that, or even an unplanned one, even like COVID for that matter, right?
mm,
How have they been evolving? So if you really look at uh, everyone, like each one of us has someone or the other in our family who has been an LIC consultant, an LIC agent.
correct.
What are they? They are nothing but freelance consultants for LIC. The entire insurance industry at one point of time were operated by people who were agents, right? Then came the healthcare, selling healthcare or insurance programs to people, and so on. So there were those early shoots way back since the 90s to 2000s. What has happened in the last 5 to 10 years has been the ability of aggregating through platforms. So with the likes of the Upworks, the Fivers, where they created the platform to with an intent to bring people of similar skills together to be able to make bridge the gap between the opportunity and the person who has the skill, and that has kind of worked very well. And if you really see in the last 5 years, especially with COVID happening, the whole aspect of how things moved from in office work to the complete virtual working world
Mm,
has just further accelerated the entire game. So now, if you really ask, I mean, if you were to go back to the question as to what are the misconceptions are that it's no longer about only blue collar work. It's more about, where do I find the right person for the right role or the skill. We may have started with probably looking at low skill roles, wherein I'm sure a lot of organizations, even today, you work with agencies to take care of their marketing, branding, communications. A lot of organizations today work with trainers, facilitators, coaches to be able to do that. A lot of people have started working with payroll service providers. So while there was that business to business connection, platforms like ours for that matter, and or for many other platforms also specialize in those kind of skills that are available within their platforms, so that there's an ecosystem of individuals that is getting formed through the platforms, which probably did
Got it.
not exist in the past. So today even a high skilled consultant is being able to, I mean, you can tap him or her through the platforms like GLG for that matter, who probably can come up with a really great advice for how to move rules, or a point of view or a perspective on manufacturing, etc. So all that is possible. So the misconception is that it's only for, you know, low skilled roles. It's not for white collar jobs. The answer to that is no. I mean, we have all graduated to the level that exists, and we just need to find out where all we can tap into the platforms and the gig workers through that.
Awesome. Thanks for setting the context and helping us get some clarity. I think your example of the LIC agent being connected to each one of us struck home, because I think it'll be rare for, like you said, any Indian family not to have someone in the extended
And
family
yeah,
who's
true.
done that. And when I was in B school, I did hear that LIC one of the top employers in the country. So obviously, a lot of people chose that path to employment. And I
True.
wonder today, I don't have the latest numbers, but whether it still continues to be that much of a draw as far as
Sure.
building one's career goes. But thanks for bringing that out beautifully.
Sure.
Another
Sure.
observation which I've had over the years, Gopal, is that somehow when it comes to white collar workers, the initial, I think, preference or the areas where companies tend to kind of onboard or utilize their services is in areas like L&D or digital marketing. Is that true? Is that changing? Any thoughts around it? Why does it happen this way, and how do we grow beyond then if this is the case?
So yeah, very interesting question, and you're right in many ways that uh, marketing, digital marketing, social media planning, all of that become a very easy skill for people to tap into. The gig workers or professionals who are working on gig models. Um, and the other than that one is, of course, the executive coaches, trainers, facilitators. Today, there are platforms who have made that possible. So there are a lot of platforms who aggregate coaches for that matter. There are a lot of platforms who aggregate. Each one of them bring in their unique value proposition to the client, and it makes it easier. Um, why has it been that way? It's because one part of the problem is solved for an organization, which is I don't need to go to many people to find resources, or I don't need to, you know, look at this as, you know, I have to publish a role somewhere, talk about it, and then hire people, interview people, and all of that. All of those screening, sourcing, etc., gets done by platform players, and then kind of we are able to bridge that gap. The beauty lies, actually speaking, is in how can we simplify the scope. Do organizations have clarity in terms of what they want, um, in terms of resources to solve this particular problem? Maybe, may not be. The more clear they are about why they want this person and what they want this person to do, that makes it easier to convert that into a consultant mode. It's a journey, Vikas. I mean, it's not something that we have mastered or we can claim that it is growing really well. It's going to be a journey of education. We need to talk more about it. So look at, like, I mean, I'm sure IT has had its fair share of crystallization, if I can call that, of roles and responsibilities where people can say that this part of the role that I want to be doing, I can get it done through a consultant or a freelancer. This part of the role I would want to retain for myself. In fact, I would like to quote a wonderful book, and I think it's a must read for a lot of readers tuning in. And I happen to also speak to this gentleman who wrote this book. It's called The Agile Shift, and written by Jonathan Younger. I have had the privilege to speak to him multiple times about this topic, and he's very passionate about that as well. In that book, he's clearly brought broken down the ways of how a role should be looked at. So, are there roles that I would want to sorry, the agile talent, not the agile shift. I'm sorry about that. How do I look at roles in a manner that is is easy to be given to a consultant? How do I give roles that are uh, uh, pretty much strategic in nature, and I would want to retain it within the organization, would want to hire someone, and it could be a senior role, it could be a junior role, or probably even look at how do I outsource roles to larger players in the market who specialize those in those skills. For example, payroll as a service, and I started my career with that 20 years ago, is a commoditized service today, and a lot of organizations have outsourced payroll to the players like Hewitt and so on, and of course a lot more now in the market with AI and digital tech coming in. Uh, the question is, what part of the role do I want to keep within the organization for strategic reasons? What part of the role can I, look at outsourcing or even crowdsourcing for that matter? And that is a conversation that a lot of people in the business and HR have not had so far. And we need to have those conversations a lot more in detail to see if I have a job description that tells me this person is responsible to do 10 things. In those job description, are there three things that I can give it off to someone else? Can someone else who has better skills and sits outside in the overall ecosystem come and do the same thing for a better price point, better pace, and so on? So if you really start looking at job descriptions, what is supposed to be done in that function, in those granular level of details, maybe we will be able to adopt the gig economy much faster, and probably that's why a conversation like this is very important. Because you're on mute.
Sorry, thanks for sharing that. And when you're talking about gig economy, I think you brought it out very beautifully that I think companies really need to start from scratch and looking at the work requirement, the job role, the job description, and so on. So, thanks for bringing it up. I just want to remind our guests that we'll be taking live questions as well. So please put those in the comment box, and they'll flow into us. Apart from that, we also have another lucky draw today, which is a copy of my book, HR in My Heart. One of you can win it. All you need to do is write this hashtag in the comments, either on YouTube or LinkedIn, wherever you're watching us. And it's hashtag Gopal for Gigs. I want to share that in last week's Heartfelt Conversation, we had Anil Thumbre who won the book, and it's already about to reach him either today or tomorrow latest. So do not forget, put in those comments in the comment box, and we'll happily look forward to gifting you a book or take your comment questions here online. So coming back to you, Gopal, thanks for throwing in that insight. What I'd like to explore next is to try and understand, what are the challenges or the core issues that organizations face when they have to integrate gig workers into their business models.
Very interesting. And it's one of the reasons why adoption has been not that great. If you really look at how things have been in the last 10 years, right? And when we started integrating um, professionals from third party organizations to come and sit within the workforce, there was a clear demarcation between these are our employees, these are not our employees, and what would I do for our employees would be very different than what I would do for a third party payroll employee or a consultant for that matter. And that somehow stayed on. And there are practical reasons, there are legal reasons of doing something for someone and not doing something for someone. But in the current context where there is a need for better teaming, better camaraderie, there is a need for us to relook at some of those assumptions that we made. Do we really need to treat a person in a particular manner uh, because the person doesn't belong to the organization? And what we did in EY, at least when I was running the program at EY in terms of GigNow, was as much as possible, if there could be integration of processes, policies. So, for example, one of the things, and of course, it doesn't apply to everybody who is a gig worker or someone who comes in as a gig worker consultant. But as much as possible, if you were to employ someone on a gig employment model, which is like an employee but on contractual basis, could we give them the same level of provident fund, same level of benefits, and for that matter, even our social security code, which is of course yet to be implemented, speaks for that, vouches for that. If there is a consultant model where the person is completely on a consulting mode where he raises an invoice and gets paid for the work, that's slightly different. That kind of, you need to find a way, but still, you could still offer them training programs. You could still offer them your smaller perks that you could typically give to anybody. And it's very easy for you to even broaden the net to give it to others as well. So I think we need to go away from that blanket approach of I would do this for certain people and I would not do this for certain people, and ask ourselves this question: does it still hold valid, and do we really need to keep it that way? And if yes, what is the reason? So that's on the part of the broader benefits piece. But in terms of culture, I think more and more it's a generational thing, is what I also realize, and
Okay.
think Gen Zs and Gen Alphas would be able to work on this a lot better, and even Gen Y probably for that matter, because we've all worked as part of global teams. We started our career with organizations across seas and oceans, where we all were one team at the end of the day, and so the definition made us part of a larger organization. So it's probably the definition that we need to re-look at. And if you're able to do that for our organizations, where we're able to treat everybody with the same amount of respect and the value for the skills that they are bringing onto the table, no matter what the model of engagement is, I think it kind of solves a purpose. It requires conversation, because I'll come back to the same thing. It requires conversation. It requires mindful application of asking each other this question: why are we treating this person differently, for what reason, and is that how it should be? Of course, as I said, there will be legal reasons, absolutely follow that. But if there are reasons where you're just excluding people for the sake of old written rules, maybe we want to challenge that.
In fact, thanks for throwing some light there. And I think you touched upon this, but if I can just request you, Gopal, to elaborate a bit more, because a dear friend and HR professional, Sahil, asks that over the years, has the whole issue of social security been solved? Because the way I heard you, I think it needs not only companies, but it also needs government to come into the mix and help facilitate this, right? Or am I reading it incorrectly?
So the code solves for it to a great extent. Of course, it's to be enforced at some point of time, which I think will happen. But if I can go back to the comment that I made, there are two modes that we engage with any consultant or a freelancer or a gig worker. One is where we are employing this person as a short term contractual workforce, where of course we would give them the social security benefits as part of the model of engagement, which the even the earlier law requires you to do that, and the current law of course makes it mandatory as well. The other is the consultant mode, where the person is on his own. He's an independent consultant. He has his own entity of that manner, and raises an invoice for the scope of work that has been predetermined. And that is where you typically deduct a 10% TDS and pay the money. And of course, GST application, GST compliances are required. For that population, which is sizable population today, the social security is not solved for. And when I say social security is not solved for, it's from a perspective that the assumption is that these are all small and medium business owners. They are earning their own money. They are like any other kirana wala, for that matter, from a business
Yeah.
perspective,
Correct.
not from a skill perspective. And they have all that they need to be able to take care of their own social security requirements, be it medical insurance or be it provident fund. They can make their own investments as well. The highs, I mean, the possibility of them to be able to make more money for such people is higher. So the whole notion of, do I need to have a provident fund and a gratuity for this particular individual, probably fails there, because at the end of the day, the assumption is that the person is really senior in the whole game, and charges really good money for that matter. So, for example, let's talk about a trainer as an example. A trainer who comes and trains in an organization would charge anywhere between 55 to 1 lakh rupees or even upwards per day. And he may do this for 100 days in a year. Let's assume it to be the number for 100 days in a year, taking sizable amount money for himself. Do we really need to worry about obligations for social security for this individual? He's a businessman at the end of the day, or he or she is a businessman and can run his or her own business for that matter, and ideally should be able to take care of that. And that's the assumption. That's a conundrum which a lot of organizations are unable to figure out as to where does it stand. So gig workers gets a little tricky because of this, difference where uh, either you employ them where you're having exclusive rights with this individual for set of months together, or you engage with them on a model which is just like in a consultant agreement where you're saying this is my scope, and I want you to deliver. You quote a fee and get paid for it, right? Just like how we would engage with a
Yeah,
trainer for that matter. So that's where we stand at this point of time, because
sure. In fact, Naren also asked some very interesting questions. I think the first you've already answered in fairly high depth. The second one, which is also something that I also struggle with, it because there's so many different employment models nowadays. You wonder what is gig, what is solopreneur, what is an entrepreneur, what is a full-time employee, what is an outsourced third-party employee. So simply, the question that he's asked is, what is the difference between outsourcing, example, payroll outsourcing, and a gig economy, that is a freelance coach? Are these overlapping? Are they different?
depends, and a lot goes into the business models as well, right? For that matter, outsourcing earlier would be from a business perspective. I'm identifying a set of work, giving it to another organization to execute. So it's kind of an understanding between two businesses that I'm not going to be responsible for doing this kind of work. I'm giving the work to you. Now, who you decide to work with to be able to deliver is something I'm not really, that much bothered about. I may want to have some rules where I can say, I want you to only employ full-time resources to be able to deliver so that the quality of work doesn't get impacted. It doesn't impact my delivery, it doesn't impact my risks to the sensitivity of data, etc., etc. But the organization who's taking the work which is outsourced also has a choice whether they want to do it with a set of employees within the organization, or would they want to further outsource it to a freelance consultant. A lot of times it is a decision that is taken based on the skill availability in the market. If there are more people available as freelancers to do this kind of work, and it doesn't make sense for me to employ people throughout the month for it, I would rather further outsource it to a freelancer. Freelancing, on the other hand, from an individual's perspective, I choose when I want to work, what I want to work, who do I want to work for, how much I want to charge for that work. And the rules are defined by me as a consultant and a freelancer. Right. Now I can also choose to be on a contractual engagement with someone. It could be a retainer model, it could be it could be an employment agreement for that matter, or I could be on a scope based agreement as well, where there is a predefined scope, like you come here, deliver these 2 days of training. I'm just taking training as an example because it's very easy for people to understand
Sure.
that. So 2 days of training, you will get paid for the 2 days of training at this much price, and that's about it. What you do before that, what you do after that, is none of our concern. So that's the freelancer economy model. Now the person can do freelancing with multiple clients, and as long as the conflict doesn't arise, as long as one thing doesn't affect the other, we are okay with that. The biggest challenge lies when people who have been employees, and I'm not talking about people who have now been used to be employees with that safety net cushion of getting paid and all of that, transition to becoming a freelancer and play the new game using old rules.
Okay.
Where the challenge is, I don't get salary, I don't get 30 days ka salary every month. There may be days when I don't have work. There may be days when I'm overworked. A client may want to come and, want you to come and do a session or a consulting project over the weekend. So all of that goes for a toss. So it has to, one has to really take the conscious decision of how they want to transition into freelance model as well. So that's something that I do at length as a coach as well, where a lot of people are in this mode right now. But yeah, that's the answer. So I don't know if I answered the question that Naren had. Outsourcing is nothing but a business giving the work to another business, whereas freelancing is a business giving work to individuals, set of individuals, either directly or through aggregators like us, for that matter.
Sure. And while you were sharing that, Gopal, it just struck me that in some sense, I think you were pointing towards this, that uh, when you consciously decide to become, let's say, a gig worker, are you in some sense mentally attuning yourself to think and operate like an entrepreneur more than an employee? Is that what should be your starting point?
One requires to have an entrepreneurial mindset, understanding of what it takes to be a freelancer or a gig worker. And it comes only through, it requires a lot of planning. It requires a lot of, shift internally in the thoughts to be able to be okay with that, right? As I said, what if I don't get salary for a month,
Hmm.
for a couple of months, what few months in a year, right? One of the biggest struggles that I've seen mostly people go through when they're making this transition is they don't know how to market themselves. And in the world of freelancing and consulting, it is all about your brand. You're no longer working for a brand, remember that. You're working for others. You could work for multiple brands, but what gets you your first gig, second gig, third gig, fourth gig is how well do you do the first work. And even for the first work that you get, you need to be established and people should know you for who you are and what you do. And this is where I think the whole conversation about LinkedIn, which you and I keep having, Vikas, is, what is the requirement of people to be on LinkedIn? And a lot of people typically would make this statement as, yeah, I am there on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
But what do you do? Yeah, I keep looking at, I liked your post, but I didn't see, any engagement with that. Uh, so how do you then emphasize to such people on, how do you announce it to the world that you are looking for this kind of work now? um, the second mistake that such people would make is that they would use old format of CV of what they have done instead of what they can do, right? And that's a big shift that one needs to bring in, because yeah, while the world respects you for who you are, what you have done so far, your highlights of accomplishments, for all you know, the work that is going to come your way doesn't require the whole 20, 30 years of experience. It requires probably what you did in the last 5 years, or probably not, doesn't even require that. It's purely a combination of what you have done in the 30 years, in
Yeah.
your ability to deliver it into a capsule sized session, for that matter, or a consulting project, for that matter, or an advisory board membership project, for
Hmm.
that matter. And in that, a one pager profile, or a small 2 3 pager detailed outline of what you can do is something that one needs to focus on. And I think that's one other challenge that a lot of people who are transitioning into this kind of model uh, struggle with. And the third, of course, is very important one, and we don't really teach that, and which is why I think we have wonderful people like Sharon who help us now with that, is personal finances, right? We don't
Yeah.
really plan for an eventuality that I will not be employed, which means that if I used to get 50, 60 lakh rupees a year, or whatever that number is, what if I don't get that for a year? Do I have the ability to be without money for a year? Or do I have the confidence that I can make more than that in a year? I think that's a conundrum that typically people face. And I think these are all extremely challenging conversations that one needs to have within internally with the family, to be able to get answers to that.
Super. Thanks for throwing light on that. I think that's something we will also get into a little later again, because that's an
Sure,
area I think the community will benefit from.
sure.
Meanwhile, I just want to remind our listeners that we have this contest going on. The ones with as of now, I think three entries, which means they are going to be very easily winning this. One of them is going to be easily winning this book, HR in My Heart, which is my book. So why don't you give them some competition and throw in that hashtag in the comments, hashtag Gopal for gigs. Here's a subject matter expert on this subject, and let's take entire benefit of the 1 hour that we have with him. Coming back to our questions and our discussions, Gopal, I think there are a number of questions which are related. So I'm going to just pull them up quickly. And they are to do with the business environment in India and the acceptability of gig workers and the scale it's reached and so on. So Colonel Zal Tantra, again, a very accomplished individual and a good friend. He asks, are employers hesitant to employ gig workers in white collar roles? As certain HR professionals are for on roll employees only, and also regarding the age of the person involved. Is that a matter or a point that comes under discussion often in your conversations? Is there an age bias?
Not not so much for, to be very honest, age bias exists for today. I mean, if I can say, for full-time roles, but not so much for consultants, because for consultant roles and opportunities, what is most important is whether you are able to pull off a project like this, and with the background, the pedigree, the experience that the person carries, it always is, it's always a good thing to have more number of years of experience. So age is not a concern there. What are the concerns in such case? And Karnazal is a very good friend of mine. I met him a couple of years ago when he was in Bangalore, and very soon gonna meet him as well when he comes
Lovely.
back. But the biggest aspect that we really need to focus on is, again, going back to my point of how do we position ourselves, right? What are we known for? How do we convert that into, does this work for the opportunity that the organization has for me? Which is where, if you really look at it from a, like, consider ourselves as a product or a business for a moment, I would rather focus on who am I, what do I do, why do I do for, I mean, my purpose of doing this, and at the end of the day, how well do I do, right? The initial challenge that people face would be to agree on a particular price point, right? The first challenge, of course, is still being able to find the opportunity. The second challenge, of course, is going to be able to find the right price point of what should I quote for a project like this. And that's something that we can talk in detail if that's of interest. But how do I convert my opportunities into, I mean, the requests into opportunities where I can actually deliver, is one of the things that we need to really categorically plan. And it is not like how we would typically approach a full-time role, where we would just send our CVs and wait for the recruiter to take care of the whole range of things. Mind you, in this context, you're not dealing with a recruiter. You're dealing with mostly a business leader and a procurement fellow. And the procurement people would are also not as equipped to handle matters like these, because they don't have a benchmark in terms of what should I ideally, what should ideally be a number. So what should negotiation look like? Probably there are very lesser number of precedents for that matter. So how do you then convert your number of years of experience into being able to tell the person that I'm ready to do this work for you at this price point, and this is negotiable, non-negotiable, and let's work on making this happen. uh, it's slightly different approach to the whole game than, sending our CV and waiting for the recruiter to take care of it and get an employment contract for that matter.
Super. Thank you so much for that. I hope that answers your question, Colonel. And on similar lines, Vivek Datta has asked for some information, clarity on the size of the global or the gig economy today and India's share in that. Would you have some? data points or
Uh,
some?
a lot of data points are dated as of 2020 and 2023. So there hasn't been new research that has been done, or maybe it's under works and it will soon be published. But Niti Aayog did some work around this a couple of years ago, and they have published the data. But of the conversations that we have had with organizations, the intent is for us to go to at least 5% over the next few years. 5% of workforce would be gig workers. Anything more than that is the best thing. But my point on that is slightly more broader in nature, because what I'm also thinking about is in the next 5 to 7 years, Gen Alpha is going to start hitting the workforce. Gen Alpha comes with a very different expectation and different value system. Now, whether you call it good or bad, that's a debatable topic for another day. But Gen Z and Gen Alpha are gonna rule and dictate a lot of terms, which will probably require organizations to rethink on some of the role descriptions, role longevity, career positioning, etc. Because I mean, already we are seeing, and you've been in this business long enough, because you would know this, that a lot of organizations who hire heavily on from these campuses struggle with being able to retain them for beyond probably 18 months, right?
Yeah,
And why is that? They would want higher growth, more money, more salary, or better opportunities. Or the first thing that they would probably say is the work that I was trained for versus what I'm doing is very different, and I would want better opportunities. Or they may go for upskilling, higher education, etc.
mm,
So they are deciding a lot of things for what organization is going to do. And by virtue of that, my gut says that we will probably see a larger adoption in the next 5 to 7 years,
okay,
because there will be people who would demand for it. May not be exactly the way it is right now. It may look very different probably, but there will be a lot of demand for flexibility. There's going to be a lot of demand for lower number of work hours in a day, so that I can pursue my passion as well, etc.,
sure,
which will require us to rethink HR policies overall, and whether and even procurement policies for that matter. I was interestingly doing a session for one of the organizations on Industry 5.0, and what if robots and are going to be part of your workforce? So not only employees, gig workers, but now also robots.
mm, true.
And how would that combination look like? So what would a role of a recruiter or a procurement professional look like in the next few months or next few years? It's going to be an interesting one to explore.
Superb. I think already giving me thoughts for a future session with you. Then in that case. But
Sure,
thanks
more than
for
happy.
taking Vivek's question. I'm sure he'll have greater clarity on that. And while we have a number of more questions from the audience that I'm dying to ask you, I think there's one question which I do want you to address. This is something that I did talk about or share in my post as a lead up to this conversation. And a lot of my community, a lot of the connections that I have are in a similar you can say age bracket. They are all from a similar background of having worked in large corporates for a number of decades. And now over the years we also realized, Gopal, and being very real about it, the fact that moment you're beyond 40, 45, there is a slight risk you carry in terms of career longevity in corporates, because uh, the pyramid gets very narrow at the top. Your costs are just already inflated to a level where every appraisal cycle could be landing into a questionable situation. And
Yeah,
we've also seen over the last couple of years, as the situation economically has tightened, that a number of such individuals have also been relieved and been had to move out of their organizations. Now, for someone like that who's worked for decades in a structured corporate full-time employee kind of role with the attendant perks and benefits, changing your mindset into becoming a gig worker poses a challenge at multiple levels. So how are such individuals supposed to, or what would the guidance be for them in terms of how do they make this transition? Because getting another opportunity, like you mentioned again, at that 60, 70, 80 lakh kind of range, can also be a challenging situation, right? And it can take an extended period of time. So is there something that such individuals can do to make themselves ready for the gig economy, jump into it, and not lose out?
Oh, it's real. And in fact, m- most of my conversations these days with people are exactly on those topics. And most of the conversations that I think, given where we are right now, because you and I think we resonate this very well. Um, is there money to be made? The answer is yes, right? I don't think as a nation there is a struggle for money to be, I mean, for us to be able to make money, right? Can we make money? That's going to be a question, right? And how is going to be a question. Now, one of the first things that we need to debunk, if I can say, is it's okay to take time to figure out what we need to do and by when do we need to do if we are financially little sound. When I say financially little sound, we have money worth 6 to 12 months to take care of our immediate needs, may not be investments but immediate day-to-day work expenses. We should be good. The person needs to sit down and think as to what should I be doing. And the first question that I keep asking myself, and this is the first question that I asked myself way back in 2017, is what do I do today that I can monetize? If I can monetize, at what price point, right? So, is it coaching? Is it teaching? Is it working for an organization? Is it picking up consulting projects? Is it what? I mean, whatever. There may be 10 things that you have done in the last 25, 30 years of your career. What is it that you can convert into a monetization aspect? Now, once you have that clarity, you may have two or three or four, or maybe even one line item for that matter. Then ask this question: what do I charge and who's going to pay me for that? Right? So you may come up with some crazy numbers. Please do not get to the stage of equating to I should earn my full time job's salary again immediately. It may happen, it may not happen. You may, for all you know, you may even go beyond the number. And for all you know, you may not reach that number as well. But the first and the most important test would be what do I do? How can I monetize this? Who's going to pay me for this work that I do? And at what price point? Now, if I were to say that a classic example of training again, trainers typically charge anywhere between 50,000 rupees, and there are trainers who charge 25 lakh rupees as well for an hour, right? It purely is based on how strong their brand is. If you haven't worked on creating the brand, the first thing would you would need to do is focus on your personal brand through social platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram, and many more, right? And convert that into a value proposition that people would want to engage with you for. Then the second question: how do I come up with my per hour rate, or what do I like? How do I know what is this work worth for? Right? And unfortunately, there is not much uh, guidance or data that suggests that this is what I should charge for the work that I can do. Right? Um, the easiest way would be to look at what were you making in a year, divide that by the number of working hours in a year, which is typically 1980 or 2000, 1920 or 2080, depending on how many hours of work do you do in a day, in a week. You will get a per hour rate, and assume that you're going to only work for 100 days in a year. What would that number look like? And use some logics, talk to people, figure out. For some roles, there are already predefined values. So you may not struggle with that. Like, for example, if someone were to go and teach in an educational institution for an hour, they have their rate cards fixed. They will say, we can only pay you this much. But it's okay. The biggest thing that one needs to do through this transition is to be busy, make as much network connections as possible. If possible, you can do volunteering, please do that. Connect with more and more people. Maybe even look at taking up a micro learning course so that you get access to bigger and a very different and a diverse pool of people where you can ideate. I know a lot of people who have done this, taken break, gone out, do a 1 year program, come back, started their own business. Of course, boils down to whether you have the financial ability to do it or not. But there is no hard and fast guidance that is available for everybody, for every individual, depending on where they are, what stage of life they are in, what are the circumstances that they are in. The answer would have to be different. So, my recommendation would be to connect, consult with a good coach. There are many coaches that are available today. Speak to them, especially career transitions coaches. They can give a lot of value by having a couple of conversations with them, a lot of clarity in how do you go about doing this.
Thank you for that. I think very, very helpful, and I think very, very crystally shared. I'm sure someone can develop this, and probably I would assume you'd be okay with people reaching out to you as well in case they need some guidance. So,
Yeah,
on
sure,
your
sure,
behalf, I am already declaring that. Thanks so much for that.
sure, no
So,
problem.
Gopal, I also understand now, in fact, that now you have your platform, Noble Gigs, uh, Noble House. So,
Noble,
how does that
noble house.
kind of, and what role do platforms like Noble House play in facilitating this gig economy for white collar professionals?
So we are a platform. We have about 24,000 people on the platform. What we do is being able to connect professionals with organizations needing a kind of work that they may need, right? So it could be a financial transformation, digital transformation, HR outsourcing. Uh, so we typically reach out to businesses and ask them what are their challenges, and they probably come up with one or two or more, and we look at what kind of consultants can solve this problem and reach out to the consultants that are part of the platform or even otherwise to be able to get the right team in place to solve for it. Like us, there are many more platforms that are available, and all one needs to do is to Google and figure out which are those. But most importantly, platforms can play a role only as long as you're able to get a stronger value proposition already in place. So again, going back to value proposition, personal branding. How do you sell what you want to be going to? I mean, what you're going to do versus what you have done so far in your life, and all of that. And that's a journey. So if people are already ready with those, I think it makes it very easy for us to engage with them and find relevant positions or roles for them.
So you're saying there is really now an opportunity available for potential gig workers to actually take the help of platforms like Noble House to open doors for them,
Yeah,
rather than having to, just like an entrepreneur would have to do, is send out individual sales pitches. Today, you have someone who can help you do that. So awesome, good to know about
absolutely.
that.
And for
We also have
organizations,
sorry.
sorry, you,
Mm,
you you also asked about what is it for organizations. For organizations, the way it helps is, instead of reaching out to 10 different consultants for various kind of work, you could work with a platform like us to be able to get you the right kind of profiles, to be able to engage with them. So if you were to, let's say, work with 10 consultants through us, at the end of the day, it makes it easier for you to, from a procurement and a billing and all of that perspective. You just
true.
have to ignore all the relevant paperwork that you need to put in place for 10 or 100 consultants that you may want to engage with. We do that all for you, right? So it makes it easier because technology allows us to do that with ease.
Awesome. And in fact, while we don't have the name here, but I think this is a question that someone from LinkedIn has posed. And I think my reading of this is that a platform like yours would obviously help in de-risking the individual from this issue as well, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I mean that's another plus of working through a platform, because then you're getting into a proper legal agreement between yourself and the platform, and platform already has a legal agreement between them and the organization. So we are governed by the legal ecosystem to ensure that you get paid on time. Now, the payment terms is a very debatable topic again. Some
Yeah.
organization insists it could be 90 days. Some say even 6 months. And again, it's a journey of education. Like, we need to also continue to educate our organizations that people are different than products. So for a product, you can have a 6 month, payment term, but for people, you need to think about them as, at least 15 to 30 days of payment cycle to ensure that they get paid at the end of the work, so that there is no issue. So
Super. Thanks for that. In fact, at this stage, we're just about 5 minutes away from our extended deadline.
yes,
This conversation has gone on long. Typically, we try and target about 45 minutes, but just seeing the
yeah,
number of questions which are coming in, I said, let's just continue going with the flow.
sure,
At this
sure.
stage, if you're okay, let's do the lucky draw. I think we're almost at the end. So let's figure out who's the winner of the HR in My Heart book this week. Oh, that's Vipul
Vipul.
Kumar there. So congratulations, Vipul. I'll be in touch with you to take your address and have that book sent across to you. Congratulations and thank you for participating in our contest today. And I hope you're enjoying the conversation.
Congratulations, Vipul.
Awesome. So, one question, I think it'll be an audience question that we want to wrap up with, which is again a question from Narendra. Also, interestingly, he wants to know how do you increase the bargaining power for gig workers and how do you give them a voice? Uh, Maybe provide a
Hmm.
grievance redressal mechanism also that can be factored in.
Yeah. So I think a lot of this is happening in the blue collar space, with uh, the need for some kind of grievance redressal mechanism, because at the end of the day, the work that people do in the blue collar space is pretty much standardized. So for an Uber driver, it's the role description is clear, the scope is clear. So if there is anything more or less that is done, payment terms are not adhered to, insurance is not adhered to, working conditions are not taken care of, then there is a way that we can contest, and unions, if I mean, of course there is no union concept, but they can play a role in some kind of influencing. When it comes to the professional services or white collar roles, it becomes extremely difficult because at this point of time we don't have standardization of role descriptions, or what roles will I go to a platform like Noble House or a gig economy or a freelancer, and it's still in a manner which is uh, done in a very, I don't know how to say. I mean, organizations have the choice to engage with people who they find is a right fit, because when the person is at the right place, right time, quoting the right fee, doing the right things. Now, if a person is expected to be working out of Delhi and the consultant who has pitched for the works is sitting in Bangalore, no matter what the person does, the match is not going to happen. Is that an unfair practice? Probably not. But can we do something about it? So it's a little tricky at this stage. But more and more as we adopt to standardization of approaches, maybe in the future there may be few roles which will be uh, said that this is how the world of gig will operate for these roles, and maybe something will work. But I don't see that happening in the near future. It's purely going to be more of how things continue. And a lot of what individuals like us eventually at some point of time, who have, by virtue of being in the industry, can command a certain price. So that's what I would say.
Super, Gopal. I think that's a fabulous note to end this on. Command a price. I think all of us would love to do that. And that's the message for everyone listening in today. I want to end with showcasing this comment from Vivek. He clearly agrees with what I've been saying all along, that your command of this subject is indeed remarkable. So I think our audience is much better off today thanks to your sharing. And the questions which are still flowing in, can only request them to reach out, connect with you, follow you, and
Sure,
they'll continue
sure.
getting these words of wisdom and guidance from you. So once again, thank you from me. And dear audience, thanks to you as well for joining us today. Next week, same time, I'll have another guest on the show and we'll delve into something very different, but again, focus towards helping you grow in your career and in your professional life. So look forward to that. Thank you, Gopal. Any parting words?
No, it was. I mean, thank you so much, Vikas, for bringing me on for a conversation like this. It's need of the hour. I'm sure the kind of engagement that we've had in this episode speaks a lot about how people are thinking about this. I just hope that we, as individuals, work towards becoming more better in and embracing gig economy, and organizations also work towards creating a platform for people to work on gig models as well.
Yes. So, ending on that positive note, guys, let's all work together and make this happen. Thank you all once again, and see you next time.
Thank you.